Hello everyone, welcome to the 2025 Roku Developer Conference. My name is Nick Wallace. I am a staff engineer for Front Row, and today I'm going to be discussing international localization beyond Latin-based characters. Sounds like a mouthful, but what this talk is going to be about is including any languages that are non-Latin based into your Roku channel. Whether that is you're in the market of the United States or Canada or South America, and you want to be able to show your app in Hindi or Chinese or Japanese, and the steps that you need to take in order to achieve this. So afterwards, we're going to be doing a QA session. So if you would like to scan the QR code, that will take you there. So international localization beyond Latin-based characters. What does that all entail? So today's agenda, we're going to be going over what the requirements are for this, what kind of constraints you have, what things work, what things don't work, as well as how to fetch these translated strings from the API, as well as the generic strings that you'll need for your app to work. So to start off, for international localization, what experiences are supported? So currently, any scene graph component that supports the font component, or has a font URI and font size built into it. So whether that's a label with the nested font, or a simple label where you're just pointing to the URL for the font. Also, row list, markup grid, markup list, things that have item components, those are also supported. The current unsupported experiences are subtitles, screen reader, and RTL. Subtitles are controlled by the Roku OS, so therefore we cannot set a font for it. It has to draw these at the OS level. So that is something that is kind of out of any application's control. Maybe in the future, it will allow us to control that if they do decide to have some of these languages natively added. Screen reader for the same reason. It needs to be able to read, and the only thing it knows is what fonts are installed and how to read those. And then RTL support. Roku doesn't natively have any kind of way to do RTL. You will have to build that functionality on your own should you require RTL. I think it would be a cool feature for Roku in the future. It could be easily implemented if they choose to add font packs like Chinese or Japanese to Roku. An easy way to add RTL support is to give us maybe an RTL translation on top of the actual translation that we already have. So the translation coordinates could also have RTL translation coordinates so that it knows where to move the button or whatever it is you're working on. So I think that would be a neat thing that Roku could add in the future. So we would go from what we have here in the English version where it says season 4, and then you have season 4, episode 1, to the translated version of this where we have simplified Chinese or Hindi. In these examples, we're going to be using the Chosen TV app that we handle here at Front Row. In this app, we have to provide a way to support over 200 different languages. So now let's get to the requirements here. So first and foremost, you need to source the fonts that you want to utilize. For our needs here, we sourced our fonts from Google Fonts. We use the Noto Sans family of fonts. They have basically almost every language you can think of, and in a lot of different styles. For our needs, we wanted both regular and semi-bold for our font styles. And then we decided to store those fonts in S3. So you can choose to store those fonts on any kind of back-end API. You just need some sort of API interface to give you the URLs to tell you how to download those font packs. So for us, our API gives us both back. We pass in a language header, And that language header is going to say EN for English, ES for Spanish, JA for Japanese, HI for Hindi, as an example. And so based on what gets passed in, it will either respond back with, here's the font pack URLs you need to download, or an empty response signifies we don't need to download anything, just move on and utilize the already installed font pack for Latin-based. So for us, we utilized AWS. You could use a cloud provider like AWS, GCP, Azure, Wasabi, whatever you want to utilize there. It could be a hosted solution that's on premises, and then whatever storage you end up utilizing for the font packs, you want to use some sort of API interface so that the clients can receive the font URI to download. You cannot store these locally within the package. These font files are going to be too large for that. So the package size is going to bloat with that stored locally. So store the Latin-based font packs locally in the package. All the other ones you can download later. And we'll discuss how you go about downloading and where they get stored. So downloading the fonts, again, we have an API call that we make. Should I receive back a URL, our URLs it's going to give us two, one for the regular font, one for the semi-bold font. In this instance, we're downloading and storing the font in the cache file system. And you can see here that I named it the language. So in this case, it would be, if it's Japanese, it would be JA-regular, JA-semi-bold. Again, this is, you just name it however you'd like. We're grabbing the file extension as well. All of these are TTF, but OTF is also supported. And then once those get stored and downloaded using the async get to file to the cache file system, then I respond back with those URLs with the new font pack. So if a font was downloaded, we set our config variables accordingly. So I have a global app config that we utilize. And inside of this app config that we'll get into here in a minute, it's either going to use the passed through font pack regular and semi-bold URLs, or if those are blank, it's going to default back to the package regular font URL and semi-bold font URL. So this just provides a fallback in case we don't need to download anything. They let's say they switch from English to Spanish as an example. So what kind of constraints do we have here for doing this? What kind of stuff will we run into? So the first constraint is storage space. As we all know, Roku's storage space is somewhat limited, but if we utilize the cache file system, then we're only confined to the amount of RAM that Roku will have. And in most if not all of the Roku devices out there on the market, most of them have more than enough RAM. The Chinese font packs were the largest ones that we came across for both regular and semi-bold. It runs about 30 megabytes. So definitely large enough to where you can include it in the package, but not so large that it can't be stored in the cache file system. So the cache file system is designed to utilize Roku's RAM. So the storage limit's based on the amount of RAM of any particular device. Files in the cache file system can be and will be overwritten at some point by another app. Let's say another channel does the same thing, and they have to download their own font packs, or they're downloading their own cache and they're storing it. We want to make sure that in case it does get overwritten, we want to make sure that we're downloading it each time if it's missing. So we make sure at runtime during initialization, we check that those fonts actually exist in cache file system. If they don't, we re-download them accordingly. And then obviously the last constraint that we talked about earlier, RTL is not supported. So if you need to support RTL, you're going to have to, one, come up with the function that reverses the string, and two, you're going to need to come up with a function inside of your components that can move around the buttons should you choose for that to happen as part of RTL support. So here's a list, a short list that I took from the website of current Roku models and their RAM sizes. So as you can see here, even the lower end models have 512 megabytes of RAM. So not a big deal. I think that's going to be more than enough for our needs, as well as more than enough for a few other apps to also download stuff. So while we may not run into the constraint where another channel or app is overwritten, you want to make sure that you code for that just in case. All right, so getting to the implementation of this, somewhat straightforward if you've planned this out correctly. You want to make sure that your API is configured correctly. You want to make sure you're getting lists and variables set up correctly. So the first thing that we need here, we want to have a hard-coded array list of supported languages. Sorry, maybe not hard-coded in the sense of it's in the package. Maybe it's you call out to the backend API to get that list. Maybe it is hard-coded in a JSON file in your package, or it's just a hard-coded array in the app config. However you choose to set that up, and for our needs at Front Row, we have a backend API call that we make to grab the list of supported languages for a channel. And since we deal with multiple creator channels, each channel is going to have a different list of supported languages. We have our initial app config, and then in this example, I'm only showing you a fraction of the config that we have. So I have the supported languages first in the list. These are the Roku supported languages. And the reason it's important to have that list is simply for, we utilize it for subtitles. So in the event that a user wants to go and change their subtitles in the video player, we present them with the list of supported subtitles that Roku supports versus our list of languages that we support. Our list is going to be much longer. The Roku list is much smaller. So we want to make sure that I don't want to present them with Japanese for subtitle when we know that Roku doesn't support Japanese for subtitles. So it's important to carry a running list of the supported languages here. And if you want to get that dynamically from the device, you can. I chose the easier route of just creating a little JSON string, JSON object to reference that later. The third thing that's important is the user data and their language preference. You'll also see here in the app config, I have a regular and semi-bold font URL that default to blank. And then I have package, regular, and semi-bold font URL. And these are the default package fonts that we utilize. We utilize the Enter font. And the reason I did it this way is so that whenever we override the regular and semi-bold font URL, I want to be able to have something I can call back to get the default. So if they decide to switch back from Japanese to English, we have a way to reference what the default font pack was. So getting into it here, we're setting up a row list. You want to set the row list ahead of time in the XML, but do not set the row label font. We will do that later on. And so then in the BRS file, you want to check that the local file does in fact exist. And if it does exist, then we move forward and we set, we create the font object, and then we set the font URL to our global app config semi-bold font URL. We set the size. And then lastly, we set it to we set the row label font to our font object. So this is going to set our initial row label font, the title of the row list. And then inside of the item component for that row list, we'll set up our scrolling label and our simple label. So this gives us our scrolling title and then the episode description underneath it. You can set your font size. I've set the font size here in the simple label ahead of time, perfectly fine. All we really care about here is making sure that the URI gets updated correctly. So in our BRS file, we want to set our font URI to our global app config semi-bold URL. And doing this, since it dynamically gets set based on if the user chooses it or not, when this changes, and it gets repainted, it gets done correctly. So it goes from our English, putting it all together, it goes from our English row list title and subtitle that we have here for our description. And we now have the Hindi and the Chinese counterpart. So you can see here that the Hindi and Chinese characters are showing for the row label, as well as our item component within it. So our episode title and our how long ago it was uploaded all get translated. Next, we're going to move on to our generic calls. So again, the way our API works, we pass in a language header on all of our API calls. That tells the backend what language we would like back. And so anything that's API based will already come back translated. For the chosen, we utilize crowd-in, but you could utilize any kind of LLM that you would like to translate those files. And so our backend knows how to call out to get those translated strings, presents us with the translations in the response. But what about our app generics? What about buttons and things like that? How do you get those translated? So that brings us to our generic strings. So normally in Roku, there's a locale folder, and you set up all your translations each in their own file. And normally the English or the default language string or phrase is the key. So we kept that same layout moving to our own system. We kept the same layout to make the translation easier. So in this instance, we just have a JSON file. It's stored locally in our locale folder, similar to how you would natively do it. And the English string is the key. And as you can see here, what we'll do is when we call out to the API to see, hey, here's our language, what font packs do I need to download? It also presents us with our generic strings. So we'll get those this JSON array of our generic strings back. And so we can later reference these. This will get stored in an object that I will use later on in our translation file. So when I call out to the API, it gives me back the generic strings. It gets saved. And then when we need to do our translation, I created a translate function instead of the normal TR function you would find in Roku. I have a translate function, and it utilizes this array that I already have. I pass it in the key, and by default, if it cannot find the string, it simply spits back out the key. So in the instance of I cannot find the translated version of this string, we get the original string back that we presented to it to translate. That way we at least have something to present in the UI, should there not be a translation for it. Also, this English version of this file is kept in the package. This allows for it being stored in version control and allows us to have that controlled as well going forward. And then it also allows, if there is no network connection, it allows for some sort of fallback to grab the English version, so at least the UI can be rendered correctly. Now we want to go through and update our buttons and any kind of component that's going to utilize these. So as an example here, on our contents detail screen, we have 3 different buttons. We have actually 4. We have a more button as well for if the description's too long. And so I run these buttons through the translation, and as you can see, each of the button text gets translated correctly, as well as the more button also gets translated correctly. So it can translate it now from English to Chinese to Hindi, and that is how we set up our generics at front row. Okay, so for the presentation part of this, I'm going to show off how we handle it dynamically. As you can see here, we've got some some videos here in a row list. I can come in down here to settings and I can change my language. And let's just say I want to change it to Hindi. What I do here is download the font pack and I reload the scene. So I actually kill the whole scene and reload the whole scene. Some of the stuff is not translated, so that just comes in dynamically from the back end, and whether or not it's been translated. If it hasn't been translated, it comes across as English. If it has been translated, then we get the appropriate Hindi characters. And you can see our menu system has also been translated as well. So I can go through here and come back, and you'll also notice that our language selector is only using English characters for the same reason we're not going to have a language pack installed to display the Japanese characters or the Hindi characters. It just can't work that way. So as an example here, we can change to Japanese. I'll reload the scene. And again, the stuff that isn't translated comes across as English, but you can see now we've got Japanese characters. And I can simply go back and choose English, and it will switch back to English, and we'll be back to the way it was originally. And so this has been a big help for us as far as getting our application usable by people that maybe don't know English as well. They would prefer it in Japanese or a different language, a Hindi or something. But they're in a market where Roku is available. All right, thank you for sticking with me through this presentation. I've got the QR code on the screen for our live QA session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any plans to add more languages in Roku OS? So I can't really speak to that. So Nick works for he's one of our partners and does app development for the Roku platform. He isn't a Roku employee, but we can save that question for the scene graph panel that's going to be happening after lunch and ask that to our Roku engineering team that will be joining us later this afternoon. So put a pin in that one. Next question.
I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, even you can ask. Okay, next question. What was the hardest part of making these translations available?
Honestly, just making sure that all the content gets translated. But that's just with hosting a full featured channel with lots of content. You got to make sure that everything gets translated from the generics all the way down to all of the different videos and stuff. And as you saw in the presentation, there still some things that have not been translated yet. But what makes that part easier is it's all API based from that standpoint. So as soon as they do get translated, they're immediately available without having to do another deploy. So as long as your generics are translated ahead of time, the rest can just be done ad hoc, and it'll immediately be available.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Can this scale to any number of languages, 600 plus, for example?
I mean, yeah, it can scale as long as you have the font packs to work with those languages. I don't know if there are 600 languages. Maybe with all those dialects and stuff, that might be the case. But yeah, I mean, we currently are supporting quite a bit at Front Row right now. I think we're near the 200 mark. So
Okay. Wow.
yeah, so quite a bit.
Awesome. Okay, next question. Is there any way to know if a font will fail to render a code point or provide fallback fonts?
Yeah, I mean, really, the only way to know is to try to get it to render, and just making sure that whatever font pack you do utilize has the characters that you need. Initially on some of these font packs, we were trying to use a lot of the Chinese was a big one for us because it was just the font packs are so large. We worried that 30 megs would even be too much initially, so we tried to strip some of the unneeded characters out, but we ended up being able to utilize the full one. So that worked well. I would say if for fallback fonts, I mean, you can kind of do the same premise. We utilize two fonts, regular and semi-bold, and you could easily add fallback font packs if you really need to for certain different languages. Sure. It's just whatever, really what it boils down to is just whatever the cache file system can hold.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Um, so our next question, since the texts come from the back end, don't you use the translation files, the ones that are XML files with a .ts extension?
No, our backend feeds it back via JSON. So we get it back the same way we would in English. So we have title, description, video URL, things like that. It just comes back already translated. So we just tell it to display whatever we get back. So we don't really have to mess with anything more. And you really you do the KISS method here. Keep it simple, and we just kept it as simple as we could. Just display what we get back. Just as I'm also a back engineer, so I always like to say I like to keep my clients dumb. So that for a client like a Roku client, I want it to just display what it's given and keep it as simple as you can.
Okay. Um, Next question. I love the capability. Whoops, I lost it. Okay, we're gonna bring that question back. Um, I love the capability of lots of languages. What would it take to translate the rest of the UI on your channel?
Yeah, so most of the UI is translated. The things that weren't translated just are videos or feature headers that had not been run through the translation yet as of the time of the presentation. Quite a few of them have already been updated. It was just kind of a work in progress kind of situation. So in that sense, our backend API feeds crowd in with the items that need to be translated still, and the Chosen has a team of people that handle the translation parts of that. And so it's all kind of asynchronous. And so whenever the back end gets those translated documents back from CrowdEnd, then it's able to send it via the API to the clients.
Okay, awesome. So our next question, are there any plans to support RTL? So I guess that's right to left languages. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, right to left. Yeah, Roku doesn't do it natively, obviously, because they only support Latin-based languages, so it wouldn't make sense for them to natively support it yet. Um, we aren't supporting it yet for the Chosen. There hasn't been a big push for that just yet. But we scoped it out, and I think being able to have an RTL translation like we do a normal just translation for XY coordinates on the screen, that would be very helpful, because then we can, if we need to flip it and enable, quote unquote, enable RTL, then it would use that translation so the button would move. As well as we'd have to create a function that essentially just reverses the string that we get back. So yeah, in that instance, it just kind of boils down to how much time do we have, and how much are you willing to pay for that feature? So
Yeah, Roku doesn't natively support right to left. So and we get this question a lot. And
mhm.
the answer is always no, unfortunately. But if
it
that's
it is doable on your own.
yeah,
It
yeah,
just takes a little bit more of an effort.
yeah. Awesome. Okay. So the next question we've got, any plans to expand to more countries? And I guess this might be a question for first row sports. Um, if you're available in more regions, but you can interpret that however you.
Yeah, for the Chosen, they're available worldwide. So I guess just wherever you happen to be able to get a Roku, or any other OTT device. But yeah, we support a bunch of languages, and Roku's we're in all the different Roku regions, including rest of world. So
Okay.
yep.
Um, Next question. How do you handle cases when the same word in English has to be translated in different ways depending on the context in other languages?
Yeah, good question. So uh, for Crowdin, they like to utilize the human translation. So they have humans in the different regions that will actually take into consideration the context. We actually just restructured our generic strings to account for this as well. So we kind of added a little structure to the JSON so that it could have, as an example, this login string is for authentication versus this log out string is for the menu. So we kind of add a little context there for the humans to be able to translate it. But yeah, definitely, if you're using like an LLM or something to translate that, yeah, it might behoove you to add the context for that as well.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, next question. What's the best way to handle big generic files at the global scope across many components?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing by big generics you mean it's just going to be a ton of strings. Um, you got to keep the package file small. So I would say do what you can and download the rest. Uh, so store what you absolutely need locally, and then download the rest of the generics that maybe are on screens that aren't, one of the first screens to get drawn or shown. So I would say if your generics file is so large that you just can't include it with the package file, then do what you can to include only the immediate strings that you would absolutely need if there was no network connection, and then grab the rest at runtime. That's honestly how I would handle it.
Okay. All right. Next question. How do you handle languages that are much more wordy than English, where the translated text won't fit in the button or description on the entire screen? So I'm
Yeah.
imagining German, where like one word is,
Yep. I was
yeah.
just about to say German is
Yeah.
looking at you. Yeah, so we ran into this, funny enough, with German. And so we actually dynamically size our buttons and text. We take into account the width of the characters, and then we adjust the button on the fly that way.
Okay. Okay. So any more questions? We've still got a little bit of time. So any more questions? Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and break, and then we will be back at 1 o'clock Pacific. At 1 o'clock Pacific. Oh, 12:30 Pacific for media panel. Whoops, I'm skipping too far ahead. 12:30 Pacific for the media panel, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll be back for the RSG panel in the afternoon. So if you've got any last questions, squeeze them in now. Okay. Nothing? Okay. Hey, also, if you're in the Roku Slack community, Nick is in the Roku Slack community. So if you think of something later on, we've got a Developer Summit 2025 Slack channel. Feel free to jump in there and ask it there. We've also got some of our other speakers there. So if you think of some questions after the fact that you missed during Slido Q&A, feel free to ask them there. And so, yeah, we'll take a short break and then we'll be back at 12:30 Pacific for media.